I used to think silence kept peace, that if I smiled enough, poured enough wine, folded enough napkins at family dinners, they'd accept me. But last Thursday, over roast lamb and passive-aggressive compliments, my mother-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're lucky we let you live here." I smiled. I passed the salt, and I counted. 3 seconds before my lawyer stood, slid a document across the table, and said, "Actually, she owns everything." You want to know what happened after that? Good, because that's when the real dinner started. They always said the house had history, that every corner told a story, every window framed a legacy. What they meant, of course, was that it belonged to them, his family, the Whitmores. Old money in a new suburb, big oak trees, red brick walls, and a brass plaque by the gate that read, "Whitmore Estate, 1974. No one mentioned that I paid for the renovation. No one asked where the down payment came from. I was just Emily, the polite daughter-in-law who made a good but forgettable impression. The dinner was to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of our family home. They brought out the good china. Wine flowed like forgiveness, and every word from my mother-in-law dripped with condescension. "This home has seen 3 generations of Whitmores," she said, raising her glass with all the grace of a queen in exile, "and one gracious guest." She smiled in my direction. Everyone laughed. My husband did too, not nervously, not protectively, just easily, like he wasn't even aware of the blade twisting inside my chest. I smiled back, raised my own glass, held it there, suspended in mid-air, as if my reaction might buy me a different reality. My sister-in-law leaned across the table and added, "Emily, you have to admit, you've gotten quite the upgrade, haven't you, from your little apartment to this?" She waved her manicured hand like she was blessing me. Still smiling, I placed the wine glass gently back onto the table. My hand trembled, just a little, not from rage, from restraint. I'd practiced that moment in the mirror for months, because I knew this dinner was coming. I knew they'd corner me eventually, and I needed to see their faces when the walls finally cracked. Dessert was served, lemon tart, one of my favorites, and no one noticed I hadn't touched mine. The laughter was easy. The cruelty, casual, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was recording, memorizing the words, calculating the tone, archiving every sneer behind a smile. That night, once the kitchen was spotless and the wine stains had been scrubbed from the tablecloth, I slipped into the study. The door clicked shut behind me with a soft finality. I turned on the lamp, reached under the 3rd drawer, and pulled the small velvet box that held the key to the wall safe. Inside the safe, exactly where I'd left them, were the files, the trust, the deeds, the original wire receipts, the signature page with his initials, Emily Harper Trust, not Whitmore, not shared, not borrowed, mine. I spread them out carefully on the desk like tarot cards. The truth was always there, just waiting for the right time to speak. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Emily," he said, surprised. "They've started," I said calmly. "Do you still have the originals?" "I do." "Keep them safe. I'll need them soon." I hung up before he could ask anything more. There would be time for explanations later, or maybe not. Some truths didn't require justification. They only needed exposure. I turned back to the computer, opened my email, and clicked on the newest unread message. The subject line stopped me cold. Ready to unseal the trust? It was from a federal judge, a woman I once interned under years ago before the wedding, before I let love rewrite my boundaries. I didn't open it. Not yet. That would come later. Tonight, I just wanted to feel the weight of the moment, to sit quietly in this house, this home they claimed, and know that the walls had always been mine. They just didn't know they were guests in my empire. They thought I was being quiet because I had nothing to say, that I didn't know any better, that if I smiled and offered more mashed potatoes, they could speak freely. I let them. That week, I cooked more than usual. I offered to set the table. to take group photos, to caption them sweetly for Instagram. I made fresh-baked rolls from scratch and added a lemon glaze to the salmon because I knew it was her favorite. The image they projected to the world, the perfect family, the supportive mother-in-law, the charming daughter-in-law, was a lie. But I played my part with care. Even the lighting at dinner was intentional. I had adjusted the dimmers earlier that day to ensure the overhead bulb wouldn't cast too many shadows on their faces. Clarity was key. Behind the decorative floral arrangement near the end of the table was a hidden lens, connected via Wi-Fi to a secure cloud folder my attorney had full access to. The lens captured everything, every word, every laugh that came laced with malice, every time someone joked about whether I had signed a prenup. What they didn't know was that every insult, every condescending comment, and every piece of manipulative chatter was being archived, just in case. On Thursday night, my sister-in-law had too much Chardonnay. She always did. Loose lips were part of her personality. It was what made her dangerous, because she never realized how far her words traveled until they landed. I mean, seriously, she said, waving her fork in the air. We have to find a way to get her out. If Mom wants to finally sell this place and give me my cut, Emily has to go. There's got to be a way, something legal, a loophole. She's not even on the deed, right? My husband chuckled. She doesn't even want the house, he muttered, not meeting anyone's eyes. But she's still here, his sister whispered, her tone souring. And she acts like she owns the damn place. The lens blinked once, captured and backed up. After dinner, I excused myself, washed the dishes alone, and hummed softly. They assumed it was some desperate form of coping. It wasn't. I was just buying time. The next morning, I met with Helena, my co-founder at Hidden Assets Foundation, and the only person on earth who knew the full story. We sat in the back of a quiet coffee shop across town, where the baristas knew not to interrupt. "You got what we need?" she asked. I slid my phone across the table and watched her eyes widen as the recording played. Every syllable was clear, undeniable. "This is solid," she nodded. "Better than we expected. They're admitting intent to force eviction through manipulation." I leaned in. "It's time." Helena smiled, then tapped her iPad. On it was a dashboard labeled Emily Harper Trust Portfolio. Below were asset logs, commercial real estate, residential properties, and digital assets, each tied to an NFT-backed ownership trail. "Your house," she said, scrolling to the most recent entry, "is officially tokenized. Blockchain timestamp confirmed. It's unforgeable, and every transaction linked to it traces back to you under your maiden legal identity." We had planned this years ago, before the wedding, before the Whitmores. I'd sold my shares in a tech startup I'd co-founded, cashing out at just the right time. I knew I wanted financial independence. I didn't know I'd need it to wage a quiet war. The trust had grown, quietly, invisibly. Public records didn't show my name, only the shell corporations beneath the umbrella of hidden assets. But now I needed them to show everything. Helena looked at me. "You sure about going public? Once this starts, there's no undoing it." I nodded. "They've been calling this house their legacy. I'm just giving them a reason to remember it." We drafted the petition together. It wasn't dramatic. Just a formal request to the court to unseal the Emily Harper Trust's real estate holdings. The moment it became public record, anyone could see the trail of ownership. No more hiding. No more pretending. I signed the documents with a steady hand. As Helena submitted the request, she glanced at me. "You know this means they'll retaliate. The gloves will come off." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Let them. I'm done playing polite. The house wasn't an accident, not a gift, not even a compromise. I chose it. I picked every brick, every window frame, every inch of that property before anyone in his family even knew it existed. Years ago, while other brides browsed wedding catalogs, I sat across a mahogany table with a tax attorney, drafting the structure of a trust designed to be invisible but absolute. It was my idea to buy the house under a shell entity linked to the Emily Harper Trust. not out of paranoia, but foresight. The Whitmores were charming, certainly, but charm wasn't a substitute for protection, and I knew better than to build my future on someone else's legacy. Before the closing, I had a conversation with Matthew, my husband back when we still believed in permanence. We were celebrating his promotion, half a bottle of scotch in, both tipsy and giddy. I told him I wanted to invest in real estate, something stable. He smiled, wrapped his arm around me, and said, "You always think 5 moves ahead. That's why I trust you." He signed the agreement without reading it. A transfer of right to occupy, a mutual confidentiality clause, and a no alienation stipulation. In simple terms, he could live in the house as long as he never attempted to sell or transfer it. If he did, the ownership would immediately default to my full control, irrevocably. It was all buried in the fine print, and he had toasted to it like it was a prenup made of paper cranes. Now, as I reread the scanned version of that document, I couldn't help but feel the edge of irony. For years, I let them believe they were generous hosts. I cooked in their kitchen. I parked in their driveway. I let my name be whispered in the past tense, like I had no place in my own home. But I wasn't a guest. I was the architect of their illusion. That illusion was starting to crack. The email arrived Friday morning, encrypted, but forwarded carelessly. From Marjorie Whitmore to Coastal Premier Realty subject, title transfer inquiry. Please prepare the necessary paperwork to begin the transfer of 237 Ridgewood Lane to my daughter Claire. The property is Whitmore family owned, and the current resident will not contest. We'd like this completed before next Thursday's family trust meeting. I read the message twice, each time slower than the last. There it was. Open theft disguised as legacy, and they were moving fast. Within the hour, I filed an emergency injunction with the local court. Attached were the original trust documents, the signed occupancy waiver from Matthew, and the blockchain-stamped asset trail proving ownership. By noon, I had a court date, Monday morning, just enough time for them to panic. That weekend, I said nothing. I smiled through brunch, complimented Claire's new hair color, offered to help Marjorie plan the menu for the upcoming meeting. They didn't suspect a thing. The performance was exhausting, but necessary. Monday arrived like a blade. The courtroom was quiet. The judge, a pragmatic woman in her 60s, reviewed the files silently as we all sat across from each other. Marjorie wore pearls. Claire smirked. Matthew looked tired. "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said, breaking the silence, "you claim ownership of the residence at 237 Ridgewood Lane?" Marjorie lifted her chin. "Yes, it's been in our family for decades." The judge nodded slowly. "And your name appears on the deed?" "Well," she hesitated. "Not directly, no, but it's implied. My son and his wife live there. It's understood." The judge turned to my lawyer. "Your documents?" He slid the folder forward. "Title records, trust formation documents, digital asset trails, and a recorded agreement signed by Mr. Whitmore, granting limited occupancy and confirming the property belongs to a trust solely controlled by Mrs. Harper." The judge flipped through the papers, eyes narrowing. Then she looked directly at Marjorie. "Implied ownership is not legal ownership," she said evenly. "As of today, the court recognizes Emily Harper as the sole and uncontested owner of the property in question." Marjorie gasped. Claire stood up. "That's not fair." The judge didn't flinch. "What's not fair is attempting to fraudulently transfer property that was never yours." Matthew didn't say a word. He just stared at me. And for the first time, I didn't look away. They thought the courtroom would be the end, that the judge's ruling was the final blow. But that wasn't the finale. It was just the ignition. I didn't want revenge. I wanted exposure. I wanted them to feel what it meant to be seen for what they truly were, in the same way they had peeled me apart for years under the guise of family dinners and passive disdain. So I sent out the invitations myself. Family meeting, Sunday at 4 p.m., attendance mandatory. The same dining room where they once humiliated me was now rearranged into a stage. Cameras had been mounted discreetly. A legal affairs show, Justice and Property, had agreed to film it. Of course, the family thought the cameras were for documentation. They assumed I wanted some record for court. What they didn't know was that the broadcast had already been scheduled. When they arrived, there were refreshments, folders labeled with each of their names, and me, standing at the head of the table. This time, I didn't wear soft colors. I wore red. "I've called this meeting to offer you a choice," I said, voice calm but echoing in the silence. "You can sign the waivers in front of you, which confirm you will make no future claims to the property and publicly retract the defamatory statements made about me. Or you can proceed to civil court, where I will pursue charges for attempted fraud, defamation, and intentional interference with a private trust." Marjorie narrowed her eyes. "Is this blackmail?" "No," I smiled. "This is mercy. What I could do to you, legally, goes far beyond these terms." She scoffed. "You're just a clever gold digger who knew how to hide things well." I didn't flinch. "I didn't dig for gold. I built the mine." There was a beat of silence, then Claire muttered, "You won't get away with this. People will see through you." "They will," I replied. "That's why this is being aired." Marjorie's face drained. "What?" Before she could say more, one of the producers signaled that the segment had begun. The cameras rolled. The host gave a brief introduction. Then came the footage, unedited, undeniable. Clips from the hidden camera at dinners. The audio of Claire's drunken confession, the email chain with the realty company, the judge's ruling. Every moment carefully laid out, not to shame, but to show. I watched them squirm as the narrative flipped, not through fiction, but through fact. Within 24 hours, the episode hit 1 million views. The public outcry was immediate. People recognized the dynamics. They'd lived them. Women married into wealthy families, then erased, patronized, manipulated. I became a symbol, not by choice, but by clarity. I didn't stop there. The next morning, I filed my counter lawsuit. Charges, attempted property theft, slander, manipulation of legal documents. I submitted over 200 pages of evidence, all legally obtained, all cross-referenced and time-stamped. Then came the media. Headlines ran wild. Daughter-in-law outsmarts Whitmore family in legal showdown. Emily Harper turns table on generational gaslighting. Hidden trust, visible power. How one woman redefined ownership. Journalists began digging into the Whitmore history. It didn't take long to find Marjorie's other scandals. Her first daughter-in-law forced out of the family estate under similar suspicious conditions. That woman, now remarried, came forward. She told her story. Others followed. My home, once a symbol of shame, was now marked with a plaque placed firmly at the gate. Property of Emily Harper Trust, verified ownership. Tourists even came by. Some asked for pictures. I declined. Inside, I removed the last of the Whitmore portraits from the hallway. I replaced them with photographs of the foundation Helena and I had built. Hidden assets was no longer a whisper among women. It was a movement. And then, as if the universe had chosen perfect timing, the call came. A consortium of female entrepreneurs, leaders who had quietly watched, donated anonymously, hoped for a face to represent them, offered a $1 million grant to expand the foundation. They wanted legal education, financial training, and most of all, visibility. "You have the platform," the woman on the line said. "Now let's make sure no one else has to fight this war alone." I stood by the window after hanging up, sunlight casting long shadows across the floor. Not long ago, this house had swallowed me. Now it radiated my name, not just the name I married into, but the one I reclaimed. Victory doesn't come with a thank you note. It comes with silence, distance, and a strange kind of loneliness that settles in once the applause dies down. The news cycle moved on. The public declared me a symbol, but the people closest to me simply vanished. Invitations stopped arriving. Text messages dried up. Brunches were canceled without explanation. "You really did it," one old friend messaged me. "But did you have to go that far?" Another unfollowed me quietly. Her husband worked in real estate. Even Matthew's son, my stepson, began to suffer. At school, kids whispered about the show. One child said his mom called me a man-eater with a law degree. He stopped looking me in the eye at breakfast. One morning, he left the room entirely when I entered. I didn't follow. I sat alone on the patio, watching the hydrangeas I planted bloom along the fence. It was the first time in weeks the air felt still, but not peaceful. I kept replaying one question in my head over and over. Was I the hero? Or had I become their reflection, just shined sharper? Marjorie hadn't left the property yet. Technically, she wasn't evicted. She was granted 30 days to vacate per the court order. She moved into the guest house, said she needed time to adjust. I didn't stop her. Some victories aren't worth forcing. That evening, I saw her sitting alone on the porch swing. The sky behind her was a deep, orange bruise. She clutched a letter, hands trembling, her shoulders hunched not with defiance, but defeat. I stayed behind the screen door, invisible. Later, I found the letter left on the bench. It was from her late husband, a simple apology. He had known he'd wronged her, had hidden finances, betrayed her trust. "I hoped our son wouldn't follow my path," the letter said, "but I was wrong. Forgive me for everything I made you become." I didn't know whether to feel anger or pity. I felt both. The next morning, an email landed in my inbox. Subject, TEDx invite, "The hidden cost of female financial power." The body was short. "We believe your story speaks to something bigger, something systemic. We want you to speak." I stared at it for a long time. Was that who I was now? A speaker, a lesson, a cautionary tale. I'd spent so much time fighting, proving, exposing. I hadn't stopped to ask what happened after the fire. Helena called later that day. "You should do it," she said. "And say what?" "The truth, that it's not just about us. This is bigger than one family, bigger than revenge." I opened a new search tab and typed, "Marital property laws by state." What I found made my stomach tighten. Dozens of loopholes, language written decades ago, laws that allowed asset stripping through technicalities, women cut out of inheritance, survivors of divorce losing everything they brought into marriage. It wasn't just me. Then I found a bill, one that had stalled in Congress years ago, meant to clarify ownership rights and protect assets acquired before marriage. It had been quietly rejected. And among the advisory names listed during the hearing was someone I recognized, Robert D. Langston, Claire's father, the man who'd ghostwritten most of the Whitmore property strategy. He had been on the committee that blocked the bill meant to protect women like me, and women like Marjorie, too. That night, I sat down at the same desk where I first unsealed the trust. Only now I opened a blank document. Title, Legislative Reform Campaign, Financial Clarity Act Proposal. It was time to stop fighting individual battles. The war was systemic, and I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I drafted the outline. Helena added legal framework. We recruited 3 policy analysts within 48 hours. Within the week, we had a coalition of 20 attorneys backing the proposal. We didn't just want visibility. We wanted reform. Then came the envelope. Official letterhead. U.S. congressional seal. Summons. I unfolded it slowly, breath shallow. "You are hereby requested to testify before the Federal Committee on Marital Equity Reform, scheduled for March 18th, Washington, D.C. Your insights and experience will directly inform legislation under review." I read it twice, then again. For the first time in this entire fight, I felt something I hadn't expected. Fear. The ocean didn't ask questions. It just moved. It didn't care who I had sued, what legacy I dismantled, or what laws bore my name now. It simply existed, steady, unbothered, indifferent. That's why I came back. The small beach town where I'd grown up hadn't changed. The diner still served burnt coffee, the sidewalk still cracked in the same places. The cottage, my mother's old house, was smaller than I remembered, but it was enough. No gates, no plaques, no press, just wind and salt and silence. I stepped away from the foundation. Helena took over full operations. The campaign had momentum now. Other women were carrying the torch. I didn't need to be the face anymore. I needed to become something else. So I built again, quietly. This time, not for defense, but for others. I rented a storefront 2 blocks from the shore, painted the walls myself, hung diplomas in the hallway, but added no titles. Then I opened the doors to the Worth Institute, a legal literacy center for young women. We didn't teach just law. We taught boundaries, contracts, strategy, dignity, how to name what's theirs, how to keep it. Every week, new students came, some fresh out of bad marriages, others not even legal adults yet, but already weary of being underestimated. They came with questions. I gave them tools. The walls were bare for a while. Then, one afternoon, I took down the last painting I'd kept, the large canvas of the Whitmore estate. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't a house anymore, it was a mirror. I replaced it with a simple wooden plaque. No one can evict you from your own worth. That night, I walked the shoreline barefoot, and for the first time in years, I wasn't rehearsing arguments in my head. I wasn't building a defense. I wasn't remembering the worst thing someone said to me. I was just walking, whole. 3 weeks later, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Emily, I never said thank you. I never said I was wrong. I said a lot of other things instead. Words that were sharp because I was afraid. Of you, of losing what I thought I'd built, of being forgotten. You didn't destroy me, though I gave you every reason to. You held up a mirror, and in it, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. That wasn't your fault, it was mine. Thank you for not becoming what I feared. With trembling respect, Marjorie. I read it 3 times, then folded it slowly like a ceremony and slid it into the back of the same drawer where I used to keep contracts and contingencies. It didn't undo what had happened, but it made space for something else. 3 years passed. The Financial Ownership Clarity Act passed through both chambers of Congress with bipartisan support. The language was clear, enforceable, and direct. Assets brought into a marriage remained distinct unless willingly merged. Legal clarity, public awareness, protection. The bill bore my name. I didn't attend the signing. I watched it from my couch, tea in hand, dog curled up beside me. I didn't need a seat at that table. I had built a new one. The emails flooded in after. Speaking requests, media inquiries, book offers. I declined them all. Then, one morning, a girl walked into the Worth Institute. Barely 17, full of fire. She asked for the scholarship application and stared at me longer than most do. "What's your name?" I asked. "Harper," she said. "Harper Emily Smith. My mom named me after someone." I didn't say anything for a moment, just smiled, then handed her the application. I watched her sit down at the desk by the window, the sunlight catching in her hair like gold. She began writing, and I thought, not of courts or cameras, but of continuity. Some battles aren't just personal, they're generational, and we win by rewriting the rules.